Donc, je demanderai à tout le monde de prendre place, s'il vous plaît. Nous allons.
I'd ask everyone to sit down, please. We're going to begin. I'd also ask the photographers to leave the room if they would. Good morning. Welcome to the Standing Committee on the Status of Women. Today it's meeting number 64, pursuant to Standing Order 1082. We're studying the expenditure plans for Status of Women Canada 2012-2011 and also the budget. We are welcoming here today Ms. Honourable Rona Ambrose, the Minister for the Status of Women. Thank you for having accepted our invitation. We have also got Ms. Suzanne Clément and Joanne Tremblay, Coordinator and Head of Agency, Office of the Coordinator. Sorry, it's not very clear. You could perhaps tell me exactly what you actually do when we get into the meeting. Also, Joanne Tremblay, Acting Director, Corporate Services. Welcome. Ms. Ambrose, without further ado, I'll hand the floor over to you for 10 minutes, and then we'll have a round of questions and answers. Please go ahead. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Me to be here today to discuss the main estimates and supplementary estimate C for the status of women I would just like to, right off the bat, thank all of you for the great work that you do on behalf of women and on this committee. I'm joined, of course, to my right by Suzanne Clément, our coordinator and the head of agency at Status of Women Canada, and Joanne Tremblay, who is our chief financial officer. Notre gouvernement est déterminé à améliorer la vie des femmes.
Our government is committed to bettering the lives of women and girls in communities across Canada.
Girls in communities across Canada. Depuis 2007, notre gouvernement a financé plus de 600 nouveaux.
Since 2007, our government has funded more than 600 new projects from coast to coast that support women and girls.
Report to the committee that our government has now funded more than 600 new projects from coast to coast that support women and girls through the Women's Program at Status of Women Canada. And today, I know it would be important for you to know that almost half of this funding has focused specifically on ending violence against women and girls. We've increased funding now to the Women's Program to its highest level ever. And as you have seen in the main estimates, we are maintaining this level of funding. I'm also happy to inform the committee that in the next fiscal year, Status of Women Canada will continue to focus on 3 priority areas that I know are also important to this committee: ending violence against women and girls, increasing women's economic security and prosperity, and encouraging women's leadership and democratic participation. We have made a serious and strong commitment to ending violence against women and girls. We're taking action to protect the most vulnerable women in Canadian society, women in immigrant communities, women that are living in poverty, and Aboriginal women and girls. Over the last year, Status of Women Canada has issued a number of calls for proposals that address this serious issue. These targeted calls have allowed us at Status of Women to focus on emerging issues and urgent issues, and to expand our reach across the country and build relationships with new organizations. And at times, we've been able to take a national approach to some of these issues. For example, our government is currently supporting 21 projects across Canada that are working to end violence against women on university and college campuses. These projects are addressing a wide range of issues such as sexual assault and sexual harassment, and they are innovative because they're led by students themselves. I'd also like to inform the committee of our most recent calls. We ask communities to work together to address violence against women and girls in 4 key areas: preventing and reducing violence against women and girls in high-risk neighbourhoods, preventing and reducing violence against women and girls in the name of so-called honour, preventing and reducing the trafficking of women and girls through community-based planning, of course, to support our National Action Plan to combat human trafficking. There are 16 departments involved in that plan, and of course Status of Women is one that's supporting it. And the 4th is engaging men and boys in ending violence against women and girls. It's no coincidence that Canada's theme this year for International Women's Week 2013 was entitled Working Together, Engaging Men to End Violence Against Women. And that reflects one of our key areas. We believe that violence against women is an issue for all Canadians to address, women and men, and girls and boys alike. We must all be part of the solution. This is an innovative approach, and it's not only led to a call for proposals, it's already led to some really exciting and interesting projects. Nationally, we've supported the work of Canada's White Ribbon Campaign, which focuses on educating men and boys and raises public awareness to end violence against women and girls. We've also partnered with Ending Violence British Columbia and their innovative Be More Than a Bystander campaign, which involves high-profile male sports figures educating young boys that violence against women and girls is not acceptable. In addition, our government recently launched the End Violence Against Women resource website that does have information on it related to this specific topic, and I would urge you to take a look at it and share the website with as many people as you can. It's at women.gc.ca/violence. We are committed to ending violence against women, not only at home but abroad. 2 weeks ago, I led the Canadian delegation to the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, where we focused our discussion on ending violence against women and girls with many other countries. I co-hosted panels with the United States specifically, and also with Canadian non-governmental organizations on violence committed in the name of so-called honour, and as well on engaging men and boys in violence prevention. I was pleased to be joined as well by Manitoba's minister responsible for status of women and many other provincial ministers at the panel on engaging men and boys in violence prevention. During the panel, we highlighted the Government of Manitoba and Winnipeg Blue Bombers' own Be More Than a Bystander campaign, using the AVA BC's innovative model, which I mentioned earlier. The Government of Manitoba and the Blue Bombers are now also working together to engage men and boys to prevent violence against women and girls. The second panel on violence, committed in the name of so-called honor, was also very productive and well attended. It included international experts from Great Britain, the United States, and Canada's own Aruna Pap, who many of you are familiar with, who was part of our own Canadian delegation. Our government, of course, has made our position clear on the topic of violence committed in the name of so-called honor by clearly condemning the practice in our new citizenship guide, but also being the first government to provide funding specifically for immigrant women's organizations across the country while they tackle this very complex issue. We also endorsed at the UN the Commit initiative that was put forward by UN Women, asking governments everywhere to be part of global efforts aimed at ending violence against women and girls. Notre gouvernement reconnaît que la sécurité des femmes va dépendre.
Our government recognises that women's safety goes hand in hand with their economic prosperity.
In fact, economic insecurity prevents women from leaving abusive relationships, unsafe neighborhoods, and substandard housing. It also prevents women and girls from developing their skills, furthering their education, and advancing their careers. At Status of Women Canada, this means advancing women in leadership roles in all sectors of our society and increasing their economic security. Last year, we issued calls for proposals across the country for projects that encourage girls' leadership and work to increase the economic prosperity of women in rural and remote communities. In addition, through our Economic Action Plan 2012, we are creating an advisory council of leaders from the public and private sectors to promote the participation of women on corporate boards. As McKinsey & Company, Credit Suisse, Catalyst, and others have made clear, businesses with more women on their boards are more profitable and routinely outperform those with fewer women. The Council will help us increase the number of highly qualified women directors. In so doing, we will raise the profile of Canadian women's corporate excellence and leadership. Such women leaders can also serve as role models and mentors, inspiring young women to set their sights on acquiring the education and the skills they need for future success and prosperity. It's clear that increasing opportunities for women to serve on corporate boards makes good business sense for Canadian women and for Canada's economy. So as we move forward, Madam Chair, our government remains committed to ending violence against women, increasing their economic prosperity, and encouraging their leadership. This year, as you've probably noted, $29.6 million is being allocated to the Status of Women Canada through the main estimates. The majority of this funding allocation will be for grants and contributions under the Women's Program. The Supplementary Estimate C reflects a transfer of $83,333 from the Department of Justice to help fund a project by the Centre d'Expertise en Agression Sexuelle Marie Vincent that will serve victims of sexual abuse. This funding will enable us to add to our growing list of promising initiatives that help create positive, concrete change for women and girls in every region of our country. So, merci, Madame la Présidente. Je serai heureuse.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd be pleased to answer your questions.
And giving me the opportunity to share with you some of the great work the Status of Women Canada is doing, and I'm happy to take questions at this time.
Je vous remercie. Donc, on commence dès maintenant.
Thank you. We'll begin with the first round of questions. Madam Couture, you have 7 minutes.
And thank you, Minister Suzanne and Joanne, for coming today. I know you're very busy, especially with 2 portfolios. Minister, you mentioned in your remarks about your trip to the UN for the 57th session of the UN Committee on the Status of Women, and I'm honored to say that I was also in attendance, as were members from each of the 3 parties. You also mentioned in your opening remarks that the theme for International Women's Week this year was violence against women. Ending all forms of violence against women is an issue that you have personally championed as Minister for Status of Women. Could you provide the committee with an update on efforts to combat violence against women and girls?
Sure. Well, if I could, I'll focus on the issue around engaging men and boys, because that was one of the areas that we focused on when we were at the UN. I was really pleased to see that the first time we went to the UN to hold a roundtable on this issue, there was some interest, but to be honest, not a lot. But a year later, we saw Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General of the UN, create a special committee of male leaders from all over the world to take a stand on ending violence against women and girls. So I think engaging men and boys is not only timely, it's essential. And so I was really pleased to see the work that was being done, not only here in Canada, but of course all over the world. We do believe very strongly, and I think all of us do on this committee and in the House, that this is an issue for all of us. The reality is men are the perpetrators of violence against women and girls, but the majority of them are good and they want to help. I think the reality is a lot of men don't quite know how to participate, and finding ways to involve them in the conversation is really important, because they are mentors, they are fathers, husbands, brothers, they have influence, they're 50% of the population, and we need as many allies as we can get on this issue. The women's movement has led this issue for decades, and that's the way it will continue to be. But we do need men to take a more active role. We need men to step up and speak out on these issues. We need them, if they see something or if they know of something, that they aren't afraid to speak out. And I think that resonated very well with the work that's being done at the UN, and seeing some of the projects that are coming forward to the status of women are really important. And I do want to make the point also with these kinds of projects, it's important that women's organizations remain involved, because what we don't want to have happen is that all the great work that women's organizations have done on this issue is lost. They're the ones that have advocated and provided great research and are doing the frontline service provision. So the way that we've worked on, the way that we've structured, I should say, the call for proposals is that men's groups, if they are men's groups, or organizations like the Y, for instance, who may want to work on projects, they have to involve women's organizations. And I think that's important, because it creates that dialogue that we really need to have happen. So I would say that there's a lot of work being done. I mentioned the AVA BC. That's sort of a flagship project, the one that's the Ending Violence Against Women British Columbia is doing with the BC Lions. It's called Be More Than a Bystander. And it has, iconic football role models or athletes going into schools, making hundreds of visits into schools to talk to girls and boys, but specifically targeting the boys about ending violence against women. It's an innovative idea. These are men that the boys look up to, so they listen to what they say when they come into the classroom. And that has then spurred another program in Manitoba with the Manitoba government and the Blue Bombers. So I think the idea is to just open up the conversation, look for innovative ideas. In Brantford, Ontario, the Nova Vita Women's Shelter has a male-led project to engage male and female students in at-risk schools in promoting awareness of domestic violence against women and girls. There's also one in London, Ontario that we're supporting. It's called Changing Ways Initiative. It engages youths aged 12 to 15 and their parents to end gender-based violence and bullying. So what we've seen, there's also a great one in New Brunswick that the YWCA is working on with little girls and little boys at a young age. But I think the idea is looking at this from a more holistic point of view and ensuring that boys at a young age know that they have also a responsibility and obligation, and to talk about healthy relationships. So I think that this is a very important aspect and an essential aspect of the conversation to end violence against women and girls moving forward.
Great. Thank you, Minister. I agree that men should be speaking up as well, and as you know, I'm a good supporter of the Don't Be a Bystander program. I think that's a great initiative. We know that Aboriginal women and girls are the Canadians most at risk of violence, and that the Government of Canada developed a 5-year national strategy aimed at enhancing the response of law enforcement and the justice system to cases of missing and murdered Aboriginal women and girls, and supporting culturally appropriate victim services. But these are not the only issues faced by Aboriginal women. Access to services and leadership opportunities for women and girls girls living in these remote communities is limited and programming more difficult to access. I've heard you speak passionately for the need of an extension of matrimonial property rights for First Nations women living on reserve. Could you speak to the need for the programming that addresses the needs of these at-risk and rural populations, as well as the importance of addressing issues of matrimonial property rights as part of our efforts to end violence against Aboriginal women and girls?
Sure. Well, I know that this committee
You have just 1 minute. Sorry.
Sure. The committee obviously did a great study when you did the work on ending violence against Aboriginal women and girls. But we all know and recognize that Aboriginal women and girls are the Canadians most at risk of violence. The statistics are very clear. So as you said, there's a lot of work being done, whether it's through the national strategy and the RCMP missing persons unit that's been established. Over 40 projects across the country that are culturally sensitive, working with Aboriginal women's groups and other groups that are working on these issues. I think those projects in particular are really important because they're the projects that are on the ground. They address the issues of Aboriginal women at risk in rural and remote communities, and they're grassroots initiatives that touch the lives of Aboriginal women and girls. So they're also preventative, which I think is very important. I'll just name one because I'm familiar with it. It's in Edmonton. It's with the Creating Hope Society, and it's working with Aboriginal women and girls to provide them with the resources necessary to support victims of violence in the Aboriginal community. So there's a number of these being funded across the country. There's almost 40. That's through Justice Canada, but this in particular is funded through Status of Women, and we have a number of projects as well.
Sorry to cut you off. Your time has run out. We'll move on to Ms. Geer. Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome, Ms. Ambrose, to this committee, and we hope that we'll see you again very soon and as often as possible in our committee. Madam Minister, as far as the UN is concerned, last night we were at a women's caucus for the New Democratic Party, and Ms. Michelle Audette from the Aboriginal Association of Canada, who's the chair, did not agree. She said that before involving men and boys, that there needed to be basic essential services that needed to be added. There are 10,000 housing units that are missing in Aboriginal communities. So here's my question. The main estimates, 2013-2014, for the transfer of the portfolio of the Department of Justice and Status of Women's Canada, that will strengthen the base of knowledge and services and resources so that the department can better deal with sexual and other problems in the community. This funding will improve the lives of Aboriginal women and girls. Could you please slow down, please? Can the Status of Women in Canada require a national investigation on women who have disappeared or are missing or have been killed?
I think there was quite a few different questions in there. Did you want me to speak about the transfer from Justice Canada in particular, or address the issue of murder of missing Aboriginal women?
It's indeed the Department of Justice's portfolio, the transfer from Justice Department to Status of Women.
We work with a number of different departments. If a project, for instance, doesn't fit within our mandate, we work with that group to try and get funding for it through another department. We work very closely, in particular with Aboriginal Affairs, on projects related to Aboriginal women and girls, and with Justice Canada on issues related to violence against women and girls through their Victims Fund. So, for instance, this project, they transferred money to us. They thought it made more sense for us to manage this project, so they transferred some funds to us, and this is, consistent with Government of Canada's objective through our Blue Ribbon panel to streamline the way that we effectively manage our programming. It made more sense for Status of Women to deliver this project, and this project is. You're probably familiar with it, with the Centre d'Expertise en Agression Sexuelle Marie-Vincent. It was approved in March of last year. It's a 36-month project that is basically around the development of knowledge for Aboriginal service deliverers on the issue of sexual assault of girls. The project's going to develop expertise of service delivery professionals in Aboriginal communities in Quebec to better serve Aboriginal girls who have been victims of sexual abuse. The Status of Women's contribution itself for the projects is $380,000, but Justice's contribution is $250,000. So that means $83,333 per year. So that's where the transfer comes in. And the total combined amount for the project itself over the 3 years is just a little over $630,000. But we know this is an excellent organization and an excellent project. So we're very happy to fund it, and we're very happy that Justice Canada is also contributing to the project.
Currently, the committee is looking on a study on harassment in the federal workplaces. Do you think that the department should play a role by helping to prevent sexual harassment?
Speak out on it. Our department supports other departments when it comes to gender-based analysis, and that's part of dealing with these kinds of issues. When the issue arose about sexual harassment in the RCMP, one of the first calls we made, and Suzanne Clément can speak more to that, was to the Commissioner of the RCMP to offer our services and our expertise on doing a gender audit. And I applaud the committee for doing the work that you're doing, because I think that this isn't just an issue that affects one organization or agency within the federal government. It's an issue that affects women all across the country, whether it's public and private sector. So, but we are there with our expertise, and we are more than happy to offer it. And we did do that with the RCMP in particular, and we will do that with any department that asks of it. I don't know if Suzanne wants to make any further comment about that.
As the Minister mentioned, we've worked with the RCMP and told them of the tools that were available to do a comparative gender analysis within organisations for various processes, recruitment and promoting women. Now, I would say that in the public service, broadly speaking, we're working closely with the Secretariat of the Treasury Board that is responsible for the harassment policies within the public service. So we provide advice and assistance. The budget will be tabled soon. Should we expect a differentiated analysis on gender?
Gender analysis is done, of course. We provide expertise, and but it is, as you know, the responsibility of each department to do gender analysis. There is, from what I see, that being done. I see it in cabinet documents. The gender analysis is done, and the analysis is provided to ministers when programs do come through. And we encourage and work with all the departments to ensure that they're doing it in a rigorous way. We also help with training those who are within each department that are responsible for fulfilling that obligation.
Can we expect to see you? You have 1 minute left. Can we expect to see you again soon after the budget is tabled in order to look at what is available in the 2013-2014 budget for the Status of Women Canada?
I thank you for that.
Okay. Alors, je sais pas si je vais avoir le temps, mais je vais clencher.
I don't know if I'll have time, but recently the Government of Canada approved an initiative that was proposed by UN Women that is calling on women throughout the world to take part in efforts to put an end to violence against women and girls. It is a noble commitment if we are really determined to participate. The UN is calling on all countries to have an action plan to combat violence against women by 2015. Does Canada commit to implement that kind of action plan?
We're done. Oh, sorry, do I have time to answer?
Yes.
Yeah.
Just
We did commit, the title of the initiative is COMMIT, which the United Nations Commission for the Status of Women. We were one of the first countries to commit, and we highlighted a number of initiatives, some national, some local, some regional, that Status of Women Canada is working on. As I said, the opportunity for us through the way that we're managing the department and our funds is to target our call for proposals in a way that sometimes is able to result in a national approach, and sometimes, depending on where the needs are, to be more local, more targeted. For instance, rural and remote communities. We took a national approach to sexual assault on university campuses and colleges and cégeps. So we do have that flexibility, and I think that's important. Thanks.
Merci. Donc, on retourne maintenant de l'autre côté avec...
Back to the other side, Ms. O'Neill-Gordon, 7 minutes.
To be with us today. We realize you have a busy schedule, so it's much appreciated. I understand that there has been an effort to increase the ability for volunteer organizations to participate in these calls by expanding the terms and conditions to allow groups who were before not formally eligible for funding. They're now able to apply for funding through the status of Women Canada's call for proposals. And I'm wondering if Suzanne Clement could perhaps describe some of the changes that were made that made this available, and perhaps give us an example of a type of a group that can now apply that whereas before they were not able to in the new terms and conditions. What have previously been eligible for funding and now they are?
Yes, thank you. The Women's Program is a grants and contributions funding program, and they are governed by the Treasury Board policy on transfer payments. The Treasury Board policy on transfer payments requires that an evaluation be undertaken of terms and conditions of programs on a cyclical basis. So in 2011-12, Status of Women Canada undertook an evaluation of our program, reviewing the T's and C's, and to see if there were any areas that were that needed to be addressed and changing the T's and C's. The overall evaluation, I want to mention, was very, very positive. It looked at 5 years of the program activities, and in particular at the last 2 years. It found that the focus of the program was still very much relevant, so a focus on gender equality. It found that the design and the delivery mechanisms were appropriate in order to reach the population and the objectives that we wanted to reach. It found that we were stimulating the right partners, and in particular it had highlighted the blueprint approach as being something that was very innovative and positive. And it also found that it was an efficient and operating program, efficient in its operations. It also indicated that we needed to focus our projects more at widening the reach, the potential reach of our projects, as well as the sustainable impact that it have impact over a longer term. So with this in mind, the revised terms and conditions did increase the potential reach by adding new applicants and categories of applicants. And one of those are cooperatives. In the past, the cooperatives were not an eligible applicant, and we found that a lot of the work that they do at the community level made them very effective project deliverers. We also looked at expanding the reach to Aboriginal organizations. Most terms and conditions do not allow governmental organizations to apply for government funding. But we found that in certain areas, and in particular for on reserve, it was difficult to find organizations, NGOs, that could undertake projects. So where they are lacking, then we're able to have agreements with them. We can also have agreements with provincial and territorial governments, again, where the NGO population or presence is insufficient to have projects. We also increased flexibility in the types of activities that we're able to fund. For example, and in particular on the men and boys, engaging men and boys on violence, the previous T's and C's had a requirement that stated that women had to be involved in all aspects of a project, which meant that we couldn't really work with a group of men, for example, that wanted to work with women. So we modified that to say that women are involved in many of the aspects of the project. So I think that has gone a long way in allowing us to create those partnerships that are important in order to open the dialogue between men and women's groups in communities.
Thank you. And all of these changes were certainly all made worthwhile. Now, one of the calls for proposals mentioned earlier was a call for proposals addressing issues affecting women living in rural and remote communities and small urban centers. And we know that women living in rural and remote areas have different levels of access to programs and services than women living in urban centers, and we are so pleased to hear that you included a separate call for proposals for these women. Sometimes rural women need to travel to the next town or in order to obtain help, in order to find a shelter or gain access to training to help improve their economic prospects. And I was wondering if you could provide some additional detail on the call for proposals for women living in rural and remote communities.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. It was we felt that we didn't have
1 minute.
the kind of relationships with rural organizations that we should, and so we put out the specific call, and what came back was overwhelming, the response. And so clearly there's a need in the rural and remote areas. It also, for instance, in Nunavut, there isn't a lot of NGOs, so it then made us think that we should change our terms and conditions so we can partner up with a government like Nunavut so that we can help deliver important projects in rural and remote areas like that. But it's true that whether it's through community planning initiatives that we're working on for safety plans within small rural communities, or partnerships to identify and respond to specific needs like isolation, economic security, insecurity in rural and remote areas. There's very specific issues and challenges that women living in small towns and small cities are facing. And so these are great, really excellent projects, and we were thrilled because we were able to make connections and build relationships with these organizations that we didn't have in the past through Status of Women. And so we'll continue to work with them.
Thank you.
Merci. Donc, on va maintenant passer à Madame Scrow. Vous avez...
Thank you. Ms. Scrow, 7 minutes.
And Madam Minister, it's great to have you here with us, and I very sincerely thank you for the good work you are doing. I may want you to do more, and I may want you to do many different things, but I thank you for what you are doing. A couple of questions. I'll try to be quick, just because we all, only get one time here. So I'd like to get short answers, but I'm probably going to ask you a complicated question and ask for a short answer, which you probably won't be able to give me. And a recent answer to an order paper question that I had about the amount of money the government is spending on media monitoring. And so it recently came back that it's over $30 million the government as a whole is spending on monitoring responses to the government. And you know what I'm talking about when I'm monitoring the media. It's something we all do. We want to know what are people saying, what's the media saying about what the government is doing of the day, right? About $30 million, frankly, is a huge amount of money to spend just on media monitoring. But of that $30 million, you had signed off, not only as Status of Women, but in your role as the Minister of 2 portfolios, over $10.6 million in your portfolios. Can you tell me how much of that was related to the Status of Women, and in particular, and what you felt that you got out of that monitoring that told you a different direction that you might want to go in, whether it's from a polling perspective or a different avenue that you might want to direct some of the funds to go to?
Well, I mean, from a public works point of view, we're the contracting authority, so we manage the licenses and contracting with the media and the news agencies and outlets. And through the centralization of those contracting, the consolidation of the contracting, I think we're saving the government now $18 million a year or something. I could get the specific figures for you. But beyond that, it's each department that makes the determination of what they need for their specific areas of information. And so that happens at an officials level, and of course then it's also determine what the needs are within the department or the ministry or the minister's office. And so I can't really speak to that. On Status of Women Canada, I can tell you that we have no expenditures because we are an agency through HRSDC. So I don't know the exact amount. Maybe, Suzanne, do you know?
At a time where, you know, we are running up deficits and making all kinds of other cuts that have to be done to a variety of other organizations, spending $30 million on monitoring what the media is saying about the government, I think is very much in excess of what should be spent, where I think of all kinds of programs that you could use that money for rather than spending $30 million as a whole is part of the issue. And so none of that $30 million would have gotten spent to monitor anything to do with the status of women? I'm
going to ask Suzanne to answer because I'm not sure about that.
We're very innovative at saving money at Status.
Is your women's organization?
And one of the things we did is we are part of the portfolio for HRSDC, so we were able to arrive at an arrangement with them that they've added a few search words in their ongoing media monitoring, and they're able to pull out the information that we would be interested in seeing. So there is no cost to Status of Women Canada, and we're able to spend all of our money on our programs.
Directly. But is the information you're getting from monitoring the media dictating your mandate and the direction you're going in?
No. I mean, I don't get daily clippings.
I'm sure you don't. You don't have time for it anyway.
So, I mean, I guess the communications department.
I mean, it's a function of every department.
Yeah. It's a huge amount of money. That's the point. I mean, at a time of austerity, when we're cutting everywhere you can look at, you know, Service Canada offices, immigration offices, and so on are being cut, and yet we have $30 million to monitor what the media is saying about the government. So.
Yeah, well, what I will say, though, to that is that as the contracting authority, as Ministers of Public Works, we have worked to consolidate the contracting so that we are saving the government millions of dollars. In terms of how the departments are using, I think that we can find more savings, and we should find a way to ensure that that is being used effectively, efficiently, and it's necessary. And if it's not, then we should look to cut those.
I think we could at least cut out half of it and, you know, use it for helping seniors and a few others. And I appreciate your, you know, promotion of our country and Canada and what it's doing when it comes to women. But in the, you know, the latest reports that came out even as early as last week from the United Nations, Canada is way down. On one of them, it was number 17, one ahead of the United States as far as advancing women's issues. So, you know, as much as, you know, we want to talk about how wonderful we are as a country, and we all do it, the reality when it comes to the real numbers that come out of the United Nations don't show Canada in the lead. At one point, we were third or fourth on those many lists that the United Nations puts out. One of them last week were 17. I mean, we're falling tremendously in some of these larger issues when it comes to the people that do those analyses.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think there's always more work that can be done. I mean, I would also say there's other reports. For instance, in 2012, just last year, there was a global poll of experts, and I say that because the global poll was a global survey, but the experts were actually gender experts. They were specifically looking at the wide range of services offered to women, resources, research capacity, and they found that in the G20, Canada was the best place in the world to be a woman. And you saw, of course, the American Newsweek rated Canada the third best place in the world to be a woman. The World Economic Forum since 2008 has placed, and that's the Gender Forum in particular, has placed Canada you know, ahead of the U.S. and Australia. So I know that there's always more work to be done, but there's a lot of we're doing well internationally in a lot of the surveys related specifically to gender.
Many of the organizations.
1 minute.
Many of the organizations that have been advocates on behalf of women and so on throughout Canada over the last 5-6 years have lost their funding and closed the doors of their organizations. Based on even these kinds of changes that you alluded to earlier, you know, to the cooperatives and to where there are not organizations, Are you planning any further changes that might allow other organizations to help advance the initiatives that you've been talking about?
Well, right off the bat, I would say we're always open to changes in our terms and conditions so that we can better serve women's organizations across the country. And so we're very responsive. We've also implemented a number of flexibilities into the way that women's organizations can apply for funding, whether it's online. We've made the application process much simpler. As you're probably aware, we're also very flexible. We'll work with an organization on refining their application because a lot of times women's organizations don't have money to hire a consultant to write a long proposal. So there's that, but there also is, we're working very closely with a number of other departments on a committee that is focused on violence against women and family violence to, if we can't help them, perhaps another department can help them. So we're doing our best to facilitate support for organizations.
Je vais devoir vous arrêter ici, Madame Ambrose.
I'll have to stop you there, Ms. Ambrose. Thank you. Ms. James, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Minister and officials, for being here. I know that in the first round of questioning, Minister Ambrose, you spoke extensively about the commitment to engage men and boys in the fight to end violence against women. And while you were saying that, I was thinking, actually, I brought it with me. I have a statement that I'd like to read in. It was a member statement that was read into the Alberta Legislature on March the 14th of this year by Donna Kennedy-Glantz, MLA for Calgary Varsity. She was actually a member of Canada's United Nations Commissions on Status of Women, and she's speaking to the importance of engaging men and boys in leadership that you have taken, Minister, in this particular area. And I'd like to read that in because a lot of what she says I think is really important. So I'm just going to read it. And again, this is not my statement, my personal statement. I'm reading on behalf of another statement. Mr. Speaker, last week I attended the 57th session of the UN Commission on the Status of Women with my colleague from Bearhead, Morinville, West Loch. Our Canadian delegation was very capable, led by Federal Minister Rona Ambrose. The goal of this session was to identify ways to eliminate and prevent violence against women and girls. As a mother of 3 sons, it was particularly reassuring to me that the vast majority of the participants at this UN session recognized the need to engage men and boys in preventing violence against women and girls. In fact, the strategic imperative was concretely advanced by the Canadian delegation, and it is heartening to know that this approach is already being applied here in Alberta. Here are just a few examples. The Calgary YWCA hosts a Walk a Mile in Her Shoes campaign, inviting men to walk in high heels to raise awareness of men's role in reducing violence against women. The Alberta Council of Women's Shelters hosts Breakfast with Boys events to bring male leaders together to inform and inspire action to help end domestic violence. And I'm very excited about an initiative launched with the BC Lions football team that I'm hoping will be adopted by the Calgary Stampeders and the Edmonton Eskimos. Football meets feminism when high-profile athletes, I heard a giggle, high-profile athletes stand alongside women as allies. I think that's really true, though. Wally Bono, former coach of the Calgary Stampeders and new coach of the BC Lions, even steps up to share his own story growing up at a home with domestic violence. And this is not part of the statement, but the next 2 points I really want to stress because it really drives home the need to engage men and boys. These initiatives have the potential to be game changers. Too often we see gender equality as a women's movement dependent on male support and encouragement. It isn't enough for my father, my husband, and now my sons to stand along on the sidelines and root for me. They now need to get in the game and participate. So I just thought that was fitting. I want to bring it and read it into the statement today. And the last 2 points that this person made, I think, were so fitting as to the reasons why we need to bring men and boys into the equation now. So thank you for the good work we're doing in that area. I just wanted to touch very briefly on another point you had mentioned again in one of the first questions about the about Bill S2. You didn't reference the bill by name, but you were talking about the matrimonial property rights on reserves. And I'm just wondering whether you could speak a moment how important this bill is, the fact that we currently have a legislative gap here in Canada that does not protect women on reserves, and that in terms of a marital breakdown, the fact that there is such inequality right now and plays a large part of domestic violence in those particular areas. So I'm just wondering if you could kind of touch a little bit more on that particular issue.
Sure. Well, Bill S2 is our latest attempt in the House of Commons to bring forward, to close the gap the Supreme Court identified over 25 years ago that exists. It's a rights gap, basically, and women, that Aboriginal women living on reserve do not have the same rights to matrimonial property that women in the rest of Canada do have. And obviously, I think this is the 4th legislative attempt to pass this bill. So I do urge the committee to think about that, all of the members from all parties. It's been over a quarter of a century since the Supreme Court ruled that women living on reserve have been without access to legal rights that they deserve. So this particular bill, S2, you're familiar with it, and not only will it give women those rights to matrimonial property, but I think the most important part of the bill is that it allows judges to enforce emergency protection orders and remove a violent partner from the home. And at this point, we don't have that protection for Aboriginal women on reserve. I think that's a really, really important part of this because it addresses the issue of violence against women and girls, Aboriginal violence against Aboriginal women and girls living on reserve. And so I do urge all members of the House to support this. And it's been, of course, the consultations on this have been very, very thorough and lengthy. It's been over 25 years. This is the 4th legislative attempt. If there are discussions to be had among parties, let's have those, but by all means, let's expedite this bill through the House.
Thank you. Do I have any time whatsoever?
Okay.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Donc, on va passer maintenant.
Ms. Isabelle Morin, you have 5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for being here, Minister. To continue on the same subject, which concerns me, violence against Aboriginal women, we'll soon be starting our special committee on the disappearance and murder of Aboriginal women. With this committee, I don't know if we'll find justice for these women that have been reported missing and how we'll bring back serenity and peace to their families, but I think it's important for us to do so. Now, Status of Women of Canada does have the ability to look at the sexes closely. I'd like to know how the department will use its skills and expertise to advise the special committee on missing and murdered women. I'd like to know what your contribution will be to that special committee.
My views known to the whip, the whips of each party are dealing with this special committee, and my view is that this is a good opportunity for all of the parties and for women's organizations who are working on this issue to put forward a substantive exercise and in a substantive process, and I support that wholeheartedly. I look forward to the special committee. I will work with my colleagues as much as I can. I know this is led by Justice Canada because this is about, in particular, about the investigative techniques and some of the challenges in the judicial system, or allegations about challenges in the judicial system that Aboriginal women and girls have faced and communities have faced. But we will be there to support the committee in any way that we can. I don't know who is going to be sitting on the committee, but I hope all of you from the different parties make the point that it's important to have, especially the expertise from this committee. You've already done a study on this issue not that long ago on the issue of violence against Aboriginal women and girls. And so I hope that all that information is available to the special parliamentary committee and that some of the members of this committee are either asked to sit on that committee or participate in whatever the undertakings are of that committee. It's very important. I mean, there has been a lot of work done. There's $25 million allocated to the strategy, the missing and murdered Aboriginal women strategy, and there's been a new centre created by the RCMP for missing persons, a new national database that's accessible for all levels of police, or whether it's municipal, provincial, or federal police organizations to access. There's even a public tips website where if you know of someone that's missing, you can put a piece of jewelry on it just so that people could maybe identify it. I mean, there's so many things happening across the country to deal with this issue. There's the inquiry in British Columbia led by Mr. Opal. We've forwarded that information on to the United Nations that's looking at this issue. There's a lot of collaboration between the provinces, the federal government, there's so much work that has gone on and a lot of goodwill, but there's still an opportunity.
I'll have to interrupt you. I don't have much time. I'd like to share my time with my colleague, Ms. Carol Hughes.
You a variety of questions, and what you don't have a chance to answer, could you please forward your responses in writing? So my first question will be, can we expect, in 2008, Status Women Canada was working on a gender equality indicator project, and I'm wondering if you can update the committee on the progress of this report. The other question that I would have is with respect to some of the comments that you've made with respect to MRP about thorough consultations, and maybe if you could table the report of all of this thorough consultations, because I can tell you that I have First Nations that have said that they have not been consulted at all, and that this is their concern is with respect to the fact that you are impeding in their jurisdiction to decide what they're going to do with their own land. And the other thing is with respect to your
30 secondes.
The transfer for justice. I'm just wondering where that funding envelope was, what that money was actually allocated for, and whether or not it's going to affect a program that would have been that was set for something else. So what was cut in the justice file, if anything? And the other one is you made a comment with respect to proposals for projects that encourage girls. I'm just wondering if you can tell me how they came in, how many were approved, and how much is being invested in these programs. Decisions where the projects, and where these projects are actually taking place. Thank you.
Well, je m'excuse, Madame Ambrose.
Sorry, Ms. Ambrose, the time has run out, unfortunately. So what, if you could perhaps answer the question in writing, would you be comfortable with that? The clerk could contact you?
Ou peut-être que des fonctionnaires vont y répondre aussi pendant la deuxième heure. Donc.
Perhaps the officials will answer that question in the second hour, but otherwise we'll contact you. So, we have about 3 minutes left. So, Ms. Embler, go ahead.
I'd like to talk to you as the mother of a daughter who just turned 18 last week. I want to thank you for championing the issue of violence prevention on university and college campuses. My daughter will be going to university this fall, and I've read all of the horror stories about what can happen to young girls on university and college campuses. So mainly in these stories we hear that women between the ages of 15 and 34 are at the most risk of experiencing violence. In particular, university and college women are more likely to have the other risk factors of violence, such as being out of their house in the evenings most nights, or being exposed to alcohol. And that's why I agree that it's very important to address the risk factors where they occur and to partner with universities and colleges to prevent violence against women on campus. So I was wondering if you could speak to the calls for proposals for women engaging young people to prevent violence against women on post-secondary campuses, and provide some examples of the types of projects that are being funded in this area.
Call because we are seeing the incidence of sexual assault rise on university college campuses and CEGEPs across the country. And so there's a lot of women's organizations that are active on campuses, but for some reason it's not enough. It doesn't seem to be working. So we thought, well, maybe what we'll do is we'll actually target student-led organizations, ask the young people what they think would work. And so that's what was different about this call for proposals. We wanted student-led organizations to be a part of it. Of course, they don't have the capacity, so they partnered with, for instance, in Edmonton, they partnered with the Edmonton Sexual Assault Center, or, they might have partnered with a Y in certain places, but the whole point is that they may not have the capacity to deliver the service, but they had some really good ideas. So there were some really interesting things that came out of that. In total, we funded 21 different organizations, so it was a national approach to carry out these projects. That they tackle a wide range of issues. So there's harassment issues, but most often than not, it's about sexual assault and things like safety plans on campus. There's still places where there aren't safe walk programs, where girls are walking or young women are walking back from their classrooms late at night, or there's no transportation on campus, so they have to walk quite far to get to a bus, and they're alone. So even community safety plans on campus to create a safe walk program. Other universities and campuses seem to be more advanced, and so they were looking at I would say more sophisticated approaches to getting the message out of the resources they even have available. I mean, some of the organizations in Port Alberni, British Columbia, the Alberta Community and Women's Services Society is working with the North Island College on a really great project that affects women in that area. As I mentioned before, in Edmonton, the Sexual Assault Center is engaging male students in a couple of the campuses to work on ending violence against women on the university campuses. Here in Ottawa, we're working with the Ottawa Coalition to End Violence Against Women to engage students at the Ottawa University, Carleton, La Cité Collégiale, and Algonquin to end violence against women. And in Montreal, Quebec, we're funding the YWCA project, which engaged Francophone students from 3 different cégeps in Montreal in ending violence against women on their campuses.
Do any of these have a date rape prevention component?
I would imagine so. I mean, there's a number. Obviously, there's different approaches at different universities.
1 minute.
But I'm sure that's a huge issue on campuses, and they're looking at a broad range of issues.
Thanks. No, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Je vous remercie. Donc, c'est ce qui
Thank you very much. That brings an end to the hour with the Minister. Thank you very much for coming here today, Minister, to meet with members of the committee. I'll now suspend the meeting for a few minutes to allow our following witnesses to take their seats. Thank you.
reprend.
So, back to business. Hello again. We have with us today Ms. Linda Savoy. Welcome, Ms. Savoy, Director General of the Women's Program and Regional Operations Directorate. We also have Mr. Sébastien Goupil, who is the Director General of the Policy and External Relations. Welcome. So we'll have a continuation of the round of questions with Ms. Tremblay and Ms. Clément. Ms. Lyon, you have 7 minutes. Please go ahead.
And it was very interesting to hear from the Minister today sort of the breadth and the scope of the programming that's not happening just in Canada, but the initiatives and the leadership that we've undertaken both in the United Nations as well, and to have an impact globally and internationally with other countries. Because I know that, for example, it was Canada and the Minister and yourselves, of course, working very hard to launch the International Day of the Girl. And so I want to commend you on that great work and the fact that it was obviously a huge success. And now turning more to the department because of your role here, I wanted to ask you about this new website that was alluded to this morning, because some of us have not had a chance to look at this website. So can you tell us about sort of the reason behind it, what happened, and what do you think that the reach is going to be for this, which is obviously not just in Canada but international, and again where Canada can be a leader in this whole area. So I want to spend a couple of minutes on that, and then I want to talk about the transfer of funds and main estimates. So please.
Yeah, we're very proud of the website, and please, I encourage everybody to go and visit it. The website was developed to encourage all Canadians, to women and men, girls and boys, to recognize and do something about the issue of violence against women and girls. We know that awareness is a very powerful tool, and ensuring that there's more information available to all Canadians would certainly have the impact of increasing awareness. The website acts as a hub of information, and it includes various sections. It has forms of violence, its economic impact, and who is most at risk of abuse. It also includes information on how to respond when you're faced with a situation of violence. It has tips for parents, educators, youth, and others. And it has a wealth of information on services available. When you go into the site and you want information on a specific area, like tips for, as a parent, for example, you can go into your province and it will identify all of the provincial or territorial services that are available to you in that area. And we feature a number of initiatives through the site, like Ava BC, the project that the Minister mentioned earlier. We have information on the Respect Ed program that is available in schools on developing non-abusive relationships. There's also the Stop Sex with Kids initiative of the Government of Manitoba, for example, that is featured. So a number of initiatives by NGOs, by governments, etc. It also provides a cohesive picture of what initiatives the Government of Canada has undertaken to address the issue of violence from the various government departments. In developing the website, which was completely done in-house, we worked very closely with Justice, Public Safety, INAC, and a number of other departments, and especially the provincial and territorial colleagues as well that provided us with all of the information that the site was able to connect them with. In order to attract people to discover this site, because we know there's an abundance of information available on the internet, we were able to access some funding from the Central Advertising Fund. We were provided with $250,000 in this fiscal year that we received through the SUPS-A in order to develop, create, and purchase web banners and Google Ads that would drive traffic to the site. So it appears when you're in Linked or news sites, so you'll get a banner that comes across and tells you about it. So if a person is someone who's interested or affected by violence or abuse, would be able to go into it and then get to our violence website. It's been a very, very popular site since its launch in February 23rd, I believe it was launched. We've had between 1,000 and 2,000 hits a day, and 83% of those come from the banners. So it's from people having discovered it through the banners and into the site.
So this is actually, when you say it was launched February the 23rd, do you mean this February, like a few weeks ago?
Yes.
So this is, in fact, a pretty comprehensive initiative from the department. Like, I'm very impressed that you worked with all the different departments and that it was done in-house because you have the in-house expertise, obviously. I am also very impressed that you're doing the central advertising as well, because as we all know, Canada is a very large country. We're the second largest landmass in the world, but we have a very scattered population throughout and up north, rural communities, which we talked about earlier. So this will, in fact, put the resources, the information, the education, the steps that one takes right out there so that anybody in any community in Canada can access to that, whether you're a parent, a teacher, a local community group, a women's group, a men's group, et cetera, et cetera. So, and given the 1,000 hits that you've received today in such a short time, what do you anticipate as an outcome for this website? Very quickly, because I have other questions.
Well, I mean, I think, as I said, information is a powerful tool. And so the outcome would be to have a greater awareness, a greater level of information, and a greater commitment by all Canadians that violence is something that we can end, and it requires everybody to take action.
1 minute.
I wanted to just quickly then ask you about the fund transfer from the main estimates. And I think that this is something that the Minister alluded to earlier, but we didn't quite have a spotlight on it, I guess. And I'll give you a small example. Last year, the City of Vancouver, the Vancouver Police Department actually held a conference to celebrate 100 years, and I want to put that on the record, that the City of Vancouver women police have now had, we have had women police in the City of Vancouver for 100 years. So last year they held a conference, they invited speakers from all over Canada to profile this, which is an incredible thing for Vancouver. Now, I worked with Minister Ambrose to get funding for that conference, and we were actually able to get some from the Department of Public Safety eventually for this conference. So basically what we did was we did exactly what was happening about this transfer of funds, and that is what's...
Madame Young, désolée, vous avez coulé votre temps.
What the Minister alluded to was...
Sorry to cut you off, but you've run out of time. I'm sorry.
From the status of women, but that's expanded through other departments.
I'm sorry to cut you off. Thank you. Ms. Day, 7 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Earlier I asked the Minister a question at the beginning that was a long question, and she didn't really respond to the final part of my question. Perhaps my question was too long, so I'll ask you the question. Given the gravity of the problem of sexual assault among Aboriginal women, does the Status of Women Canada recommend a national inquiry on missing and murdered women? Well, that wouldn't be part of Status of Women's role to recommend or study that issue. It is an issue that affects the Department of Justice and Public Safety. In particular, it is up to the police to investigate this. I'll ask you another question. Even if the committee still hasn't had an opportunity to study the report on the plans and priorities of the current fiscal year, we've noted in the expenditure plan that operating costs will be reduced to the tune of $150,000 compared to the estimates to date, and that apparently there's only $20,000 for the current exercise for 2012-2013. Can you please describe the internal measures to deal with the reduction of spending and operating funds?
Parce qu'avec les chiffres, là,
Well, you've given me some figures there, and it's not easy. There have been changes. There are transfers between departments, such as Women of Canada. There was a transfer that did take place last year. There's also been adjustments that have been ongoing when it comes to collective agreements for employees. These amounts are added to the budget over the years. So these variations are at that of that sort. There hasn't been any drop since last year compared to this year. Well, what about the $150,000 drop? What have you cut internally? I need the source of information that you're using. I'm talking about operating expenses. I'm talking about the estimates and that there's been a $150,000 drop in operating expenses compared to the previous year, and we'd like to know where this is being cut from. If I may, you're saying that our operating expenses internally this year have dropped by $150,000 compared to last year, or compared to the following year, in fact, 2013, 2014. Well, 2012, 2013 compared to 2013, 2014, please. Well, could you give us an answer, perhaps at a later date, in writing? I'm not sure that I understand. I need to see the source that you're referring to. Well, what we'll do is we'll find the source of information, and the clerk will contact you at a later date to clarify. The information comes from the House of Commons, so it'll be easy to locate. Do I have any time left, Madam Chair? The committee has noted that the strategic outcome of the status of Women Canada to fight for equality of women and their participation in the social and democratic life of Canada was replaced by the promotion of equality between men and women. How has this impacted the equality programs within the department? Sebastian, please go ahead. Well, there hasn't really been an impact per se. If you look at all our corporate or departmental documents, we use various terms interchangeably when it comes to promotion of equality between the sexes, or promotion of equality for women, or equality between men and women. It's all semantic. One of the things that we have noted is that how important substantive equality is, and that's something that has not been fully achieved despite the major advances and progress that we've seen over recent decades. What we can say is that the use of terminology has had no impact, whether it be on our daily activities or our approach when it comes to programming. So what you're telling me is that there's no program that has been changed where monies are going to groups that are calling for funding. These are women's advocacy groups. You haven't funded any new groups that have male terminology including. There's been no change. No, we changed the terms and conditions, as I said earlier, and are enabling broader, more and broader projects so that men can work with women's groups and other non-government organisations. There have been no change in terms of internal program priorities. The three main priorities remain in effect. Thank you very much. I have a minute left. So the committee has noted that there has been an increase in the 3 annual transfers to the Department of Justice to improve knowledge base of Aboriginal service providers so they can better address the issues of the sexual assault of girls. The committee also notes that a total of $1.2 million has been committed to one agency, the Centre d'Expertise Marie-Vincent in Montreal, whose mandate is working to ensure that child sexual abuse victims everywhere in Quebec have access to services designed to meet their specific needs. Here's my question. How was the project developed and or selected for funding? Well, you mentioned a $1.2 million project that was provided by States of Women Canada for the Centre d'Expertise Marie-Vincent in Montreal. That's correct. It's a project that concluded over a year ago, and one of the needs that was detected following that project is that Aboriginal communities often came to the centre to get services that were of a similar nature. The first project didn't have a particular focus on the needs of Aboriginal populations, and so the Centre Marie-Vincent approached us and expressed their interest in having a specific project targeting service providers. I'll have to cut you off, I'm sorry. So, Ms. Crockett, you now have 7 minutes.
I'd just like to pick up on that, please. So the Centre for Expertise Against Sexual Aggression, Marie-Vincent, I'm sure I'm not saying that correctly, but so it received, is this the $250,000 that it received from Justice for that project?
There were two projects. The first one was solely funded through Status of Women Canada. The second one, which was the result of the identification of a need that surfaced during the course of the first project, is a joint collaboration between Justice and Status of Women Canada. Because this project that was proposed by the Centre Marie-Vincent was well aligned with both of our objectives, we decided to get together as funders and under one agreement to simplify the process and be administratively streamlined, fund this second project for the Centre Marie-Vincent, which is what is in the SUPs and we've been referring to, and the Minister has mentioned earlier today as well.
Right. And so I'll just go back to Suzanne, if I could. And I don't want to quantify everything in dollar terms because I think we're interested in outcomes, not just expenditures. But I did want to talk. So we have a budget here of $29 million here for Status of Women, which essentially is pretty much flat in this tough economic time. But we're really spending more money than we ever have before, are we not? Because we now have Justice contributing $250,000 more to Status of Women projects that are key priorities. Am I right about that?
Well, I mean, we are partnering with other organizations, and we are getting some other departments interested in some of the work that we do. I can't say whether it's something that would have happened separately if it hadn't happened together, but it was because of the first project that Status of Women Canada funded with Marie-Vincent that the expertise was identified and the need with the Aboriginal communities was identified in particular. So I think we're pretty safe in saying that Status of Women is what the project that Status of Women Canada funded is what sparked that interest with Justice afterwards.
Right. So in dollar terms, there is more money that is being spent on these projects than previously.
In terms of program dollars, like grants and contributions, definitely since 2007, there's been an incredible increase, almost double the programs and agencies. That's the money that goes out to organizations to fund projects in communities.
Sorry, almost double over what time frame?
Well, since 2006, 2007.
Okay,
yeah,
that's great. I think that's important for Canadians to know. I also want to talk a little bit about the programs that shelters deliver. My mom was one of the founders of one of the first shelters in Alberta, and they've come a long way, baby. And I know that there's a lot of programming going on, economic development and leadership training in particular. I just was hoping that you could tell us more about that.
Specifically for more.
Maybe I'll just start.
Yep. I mean, I think one of the things that we're really proud of at Status of Women is the project that we funded 3 years ago for the creation of a network for shelters in Canada. One of the issues with shelters, as I'm sure you know if you've had someone so close to you involved, is their capacity is very limited, and they're constantly having to reinvent the formulas, how they deal with victims of abuse, because the population changes, the type and forms of violence change, particularly in urban centers where you have new families that immigrate. There's different forms of violence that and different forms of response to that violence. So instead of having shelters trying to learn all of this and educate themselves and develop tools on their own, we created a network that would connect all of them together. So we have all of the provinces and territories that are connected through the network that then connect to all of the shelters within their provinces or territories. And they had launched a call for innovative ideas. So all of the shelters fed in. Some of them were selected, further developed, and then shared out with the shelters again. So it's a way of making sure that we're not having this limited capacity reinvent the wheel constantly out there as they're working with the communities. So that has been very, very successful. I'm very proud of it. In fact, it's been featured internationally as a good project.
Yep. I agree that with Suzanne Clément that this is definitely one of the most efficient means that we've found to work with shelters across Canada. We've also done some other targeted actions. For instance, a couple of years ago, we launched a call for proposals where we asked specifically for proposals that would assist women in second stage shelter circumstances. So we're working with a number of shelters for that as well, trying to improve services for women.
Can you be specific for me? I'd like to actually know what kind of programming is moving women forward, so we've gotten beyond just the housing, as important as that may be, into programming so that they can move their lives forward. Are there mentorship programs? What are these leadership and economic development training that they're receiving? Could you just give us some specific details so we could get a handle on that?
Yes, certainly. On the shelters side, we're
1 minute.
Yes. One of our concerns is always trying to address root causes of whether it's violence, poverty. And one of the tools, obviously, to address root causes is to invest in leadership projects where women will be equipped to address themselves these barriers to their financial, social, economic success. So some of our leadership initiatives have been focusing on that, trying to get the women to identify the issues, to identify the barriers to their success, and work at addressing these barriers. So that's where we focused our leadership efforts, if you will. It was one of the components of the Girls' Call for leadership. We wanted the young girls to tackle barriers to their full implication in Canadian society, and we've had groups come to us with all kinds of excellent ideas that we hope to see the results in the next year and a half or so.
For just a quick.
Vous avez écoulé votre temps. Excusez-moi.
Unfortunately, your time's run out. Your 7 minutes have run out. Thank you. Ms. Scrow, you have 7 minutes.
Very much, Madam Chair, and again, thank you to the department officials. I know how much time you have to put into preparation for coming before the committee, and so I don't think we call you too often. So, it's nice to have you here today. The issue of the mandate, we discussed this before. The official mandate versus focus and changes in direction are one thing. Have you thought any further about looking at them? It hasn't been updated or changed, I should say, since the 70s or something. So have you thought, now that we're in the 21st century and you're dealing with a lot of issues that are facing women today in the 21st century, of changing the actual mandate of the status of Women Canada?
Well, it wouldn't be a decision of the organization to change, make a policy decision of that nature. But I would say that the current mandate is very flexible and very broad, and has allowed the minister, for example, to define her priorities as part of the RPP every year. And I think when you've covered violence, economic security, and leadership, you've covered the gamut, I think, of issues that need to be addressed that can be addressed by Status of Women Canada.
But, and I'm not going to say if, because I believe we are all very serious about, you know, trying to remove barriers and things that stand in the way of women's advancement. And I think a lot of that is organizations, even like the Status of Women Committee, frankly, I think should have a 50-50 gender split on it. It'd be a bit difficult in my case, since I'm only one here, but I'd have to give it up to a man. But I think that if we were pushing more to have more men sit on committees like this, so they understand, you know, more of the complexities of the challenges that women are facing, that it would be helpful in trying to meet the objectives that have been set out by the Minister today. I think would be quite helpful. I guess I'm putting that forward as much as a suggestion to you that I'm throwing out to the government and to the rest of us, that I think that would be another small step that we could make as we move forward. So I'm not going to ask you to comment because you're not in a position, but if you just take that as a little...
I mean, I wouldn't mind commenting on it. I think one of the things you may have noticed at Status, we have more men. I mean, it's definitely, we do believe that gender equality is not a women's issue, it is a societal issue, and that everybody is part of the solution. Through our gender-based analysis work, we have I've done some amazing things in the last few years within the federal family. Last year we developed in-house again an online training course on GBA, which all policy research evaluators in government are asked to undertake. We've had over 400 or close to 450 that have taken it since its launch very recently. We've developed now a gender-based analysis awareness week in the federal family, so all departments join in for a whole week and we do activities, knowledge exchange with our colleagues. So we're really reinforcing the consideration of gender equality issues in all aspects of departmental activities. So I would say whether, you know, this committee certainly plays a key role, but I think that departments and the committees that also oversee the work of the departments need to be active in that area as well. And I think more and more we're seeing more men involved in gender equality issues in the departments as we are at Status, and certainly more work being done in that way.
The budget is coming down. How much additional funding has the department requested for a variety of initiatives that you want to put forward?
I would not be at liberty to say.
Okay. I guess if we were blue skying, how much would you like to have?
I'm not sure.
I'm not going to put you in a spot.
Yeah, no. I mean,
right to
I don't. I think we have a substantive budget. And it's not, the answer is not necessarily more money, but what we do with the money we have, and that's what we've been really focusing on, is making sure that we try to get as much results and positive results as we can with what we're spending, and get partners.
I hope you can get some of that $30 million spent on media. I hope it will go into your department. The gender audit that you did on the RCMP, and I thank you for jumping in immediately on the RCMP issues when they were raised, and your department was given the opportunity to do a gender audit. Is that complete? Okay.
I'll just clarify. The Status of Women Canada does not conduct gender-based audits. So what I did is I had asked the Commissioner if he was interested in meeting with us to discuss the situation. Yes. And he very kindly accepted very quickly. We had a discussion about what he believed the issues might be, and one of the suggestions in that meeting was for him to hire a specialist, and we did supply names, a list of names of consultants that specialize in gender audits, and we provided some recommendations as to where the gender audit could be conducted. And at the same time, Status of Women, we realized that there wasn't a lot of information on...
1 minute.
gender impacts in policing. So Status of Women Canada undertook, we hired a consultant as well to do an examination of what had been done internationally in this area, and we have that on our website. And we've shared it with all policing organizations on how to address gender issues in policing.
But following that exchange of information with Commissioner Paulson, did he reach out and share with you the results of the work that he has done, or has there been any further collaboration on those issues?
The gender audit was completed, and in fact the Commissioner has tabled with Minister Taves a 37-point action plan dealing with a series of recommendations in order to address those issues, yes.
Was there any discussion with the department before that was finalized?
Well, I mean, at the officer level, there's always some contacts and relationships. Like our policy officers always deal with departments as they're undertaking GBA. So I'm sure there were contacts. I mean, I wouldn't know specifically what they were, but
there wasn't a direct. This is what we're suggesting. What do you think? Okay, thank you.
Merci. Donc, on passe maintenant à Madame Bateman.
Thank you, Ms. Bateman. Sorry, I couldn't locate you there. You have 5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of questions that are a continuation of the questions asked by my colleagues. First, Ms. Clément. Could you please describe for us exactly how we've made a difference when it comes to leadership projects?
Joan Crockett was asking previously, the leadership question. We're not just funding abuse centers and shelters, although we are, but we're taking it to the next step. And I'm very interested in hearing exactly some project descriptions. Are you giving women who have to reorganize their whole lives because they're fleeing from abuse business skills? What kind of projects are we giving them? Career start skills? What kind of projects are you putting in to make a difference so that they can be economic contributors the same as you are, and and the same as we all want to be?
Well, just to clarify, we don't put in projects. We respond to projects that are submitted by organizations.
But you approve projects, and you decide which criteria you're going to accept. And so my understanding is that there is now a focus on not just the sheltering piece, but building up leadership programs, responding to economic development programs. Can you speak to that a little bit, Madame?
Well, leadership is one of the 3 priorities for Status of Women, and we look at leadership in different contexts. I mean, your needs in the area of leadership is dependent on your starting point. So for young girls, for example, leadership was one of the 2 focuses in the Girls' Call that we had issued. And some of the initiatives around for girls would be could be as basic as girls being aware of the opportunities that are open to them in life, having mentorship kinds of relationships with, for example, political mentors within their communities, having access to mock parliaments, those kinds of initiatives. Leadership initiatives for a First Nations community could include, for example, organization like providing information to women on how they can access resources within their community to make a difference. I don't know, I can give you, there's so many.
Well, and that's, you've touched on leadership, and I appreciate that. What about the economic development piece?
Economic security. Again, the projects are very different. They're just as different as there are differences in women and girls in Canada. So economic security for one individual may be financial literacy. For another individual, it may be targeting non-trad kind of employment.
These aren't individual people making, you're saying for one individual. Do you have a financial literacy program? Have you actually responded to, in your call for proposals on a financial literacy
there are groups
piece?
that offer that as part of their response. I mean, we don't go out and do financial
No, but when they come to you and say, we would like to help women who are currently at Shelter X with developing financial literacy skills, how do you assess that? Do you help that?
Well, what they do is they provide us with an analysis of the community needs. So they tell us what the community issues are and
the
what
community
the needs are.
being the women who are
the
at
women
this
that they're
specific
wanting
shelter.
to assist, because usually they have a defined population that they want to target. Then they will outline the response. So how do they believe they can address those needs? And that response could be financial literacy. The way we
have you done one like that? Have you actually supported projects like that?
Oh, I'm sure I can't think of exactly the name of the projects, but I mean, it's what they do is, you know, life skills, basic life skills in some of the projects, depending on the situation of the population that they're dealing with.
No, we're all agreed it's critical information, but I'm just curious if you have given people that kind of assistance through the leadership piece.
Well,
that is a priority.
Well, part of the Aboriginal initiatives would be.
I don't have a specific project that I would refer to, but we always try to get.
I'm actually very interested in specifics because, you know, like for example, when you evaluate the projects that come in, and by the way, I so commend what you're doing with making it more accessible to everyone with the website, opening things up, moving to electronic access, so it doesn't matter where you live. You don't have to be in the heart of Ottawa.
Madame Bateman,
you know, like I guess.
Madame Bateman, je vais devoir vous arrêter ici. Non, vous avez...
Sorry, Ms. Bateman, you've run out of time. How about 2 seconds? No, I'm sorry. Perhaps there could be, you could respond in writing. Is that possible? Yes, perhaps what we need, in fact, is a list of good examples. The clerk will contact you for that. Ms. Ashton, you have 5 minutes. That'll be our final questioner, as we'll be moving on to votes thereafter. Ms. Ashton, 5 minutes.
Go off the point that my colleague referenced with respect to the funding of the Centre d'Expertise Marie-Vincent in Montreal. And I'm wondering, have any similar projects been funded to support Aboriginal service providers outside Quebec?
I'd have to get back to you on that and do a review of our Aboriginal specific projects.
Sure. Yeah. And if you could get back to us with both the reference to the programs, but also how much funding they received, that would be very helpful. Just to go back on the issue of status of women's involvement and missing and murdered Aboriginal women in Canada, was Status of Women the funder of Sisters in Spirit?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was a 5-year agreement. $5 million.
Right, and it was it was an excellent program that unfortunately the government chose not to renew. But I think it also indicates an involvement on behalf of the Status of Women in this very critical file that women in Canada grapple with, particularly Indigenous women. So I'm wondering, Madame Clément, you were very quick to denote that this is an issue for justice and an issue of policing, something that I would disagree with most vehemently as somebody who's very involved with this file as well. And I'm concerned with that statement coming from Status of Women, particularly given the work that you've been involved in directly funding programs that attempt to find a solution, put an end to the violence. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts to share on that.
My response was specifically to the question of the inquiry, and that it is an inquiry on the response, the policing response to the situation. Following the end of the project, the Sisters in Spirit project, Status of Women Canada funded 2 subsequent projects with NWAC to continue some of the work, to build on the information that had been gathered in the first initiative. So I think the first project, I'm going to see, the first project was $500,000 and the second was $1.8 million that we funded with NWAC. And it was to look at some of the root causes of what makes Aboriginal women more susceptible to the violence. That project is still ongoing with NWAC. So I wouldn't want you to take my answer to the inquiry as meaning the status of women is not concerned about violent situation in Aboriginal women. Quite the opposite. I mean, when we put out a call for proposals on violence, definitely one of the target populations that we want to be looking at are Aboriginal women and girls in Canada.
Okay. And what is the program that you're currently funding?
For with NWAC, it's a project. It's called Evidence to Action to End Violence Against Aboriginal Women. It's a $1.8 million project. It has a number of sub activities in the project, but it is its main function is to look at some of the root causes that have led women to be vulnerable to that violence and trying to address that. They also do work with the families of some of the victims and that, like the vigils.
And it's a very important program. I know people in my constituency find that kind of programming essential given the tragedy they face. I'm wondering what, given the emergence of this special committee, what role the Status of Women Canada, I mean this is a parliamentary committee, what role Status of Women Canada envisions itself playing, and I mean this is something we raised with the minister as well, around making sure that this committee takes into account the work that you've done, but also the work that you may realize needs to be done to put an end to violence facing Aboriginal women.
Well, I mean, for the time being, what I can say is that we will be following the work of the committee with a great level of interest. To determine what our role will be, I don't think is up to us, but up to the parliamentary committee to decide.
Mm-hmm. And just a quick question, with reference to the priorities in terms of funding, I'm wondering, does Status of Women Canada give preference to grants that focus on working with men and boys?
Preference? No. No. We did a call on violence, and there were four sub-components of that call that we wanted to address. One of them was engaging men and boys to end violence. Another one was to address issues of violence within high-risk neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm. If I could just note that we have received some questions from funded organizations that have had their funding rejected around the concern that perhaps it's their proposals were too much focused on women and girls rather than engaging those two priorities, or especially the male-gendered priority. And I'd like to put that on the table.
Une réponse très rapide.
I would just like to...
A quick answer, please.
I heard him mention it again recently in New York at the UNCSW, but one of our key partners in Canada on engaging men and boys is the White Ribbon Campaign in the person of Don Minnerson, because he's such a great leader for that organization. But he mentioned again that the absolute last thing that they would ever want to do is to take funding away from women's organization or women's issue, that the work that they're wanting to do is to complement the work that they're doing.
Je vais devoir vous arrêter ici. Je suis désolée, on est serré dans le temps.
I'll have to stop you there. We don't have much time. It's not always easy to cut people short. So thank you very much, sincerely, for having come here today and having shared your points of view with the committee and having shared your expertise. Thank you very much. Now I'll let you go, and without further ado, we'll move on to the votes.
Vous avez tous reçu le document.
You've all received the document regarding the estimates, and I think that you've had an opportunity to cast an eye over that document. I'll just read an extract from the Journals of the House of Commons, pursuant to Standing Order 81.4, the main estimates for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2014, were deemed referred to the several standing committees of the House as follows. to the Standing Committee on the Status of Women, Human Resources and Skills Development, votes 25 and 30. So votes 25 under Human Resources and Skills Development carry. Ms. Ashton? Yes, we would like, we think that it's a little early, in fact, to vote on this today. So we'd like a little bit of time to review the votes, or the estimates rather, and we'd like to come back and vote on this at a later stage. Does somebody want to speak to that? Ms. Scrow?
And what are they? Do we have enough time to, what's the deadline that we need to have this approved by the committee, or else it's automatically adopted?
OK, désolé. On a jusqu'au 31 mai pour...
We have until the 31st of May to table the report in the House. Does that answer your question?
The actual adoption of the report until a later point.
En fait, la raison, Madame la...
Well, the clerk has explained that the reason why we're voting today on the votes is to determine whether or not we're going to continue our study, whether we like it or not. Money is important as to whether or not we continue through to April 2013. Sorry, I'm not an expert in science, in finance rather. So Ms. Toupé is asking us to vote on these items. Ms. Ashton? Well, I appreciate the feedback, but we received information from our team that this isn't even the last week of March, so I think it's a little bit premature. We could wait a few more days, in my opinion. Yes, Ms. Scrow. And I'll remind you there's another committee at 1 p.m.
We're doing here is equally as important as what they're going to be doing. Would you just clarify with the clerk? Because what we're talking about is moving forward, so that if we have this vote next week or after the April break, it's not going to have anything to do with what our schedule is, other than putting the time for the vote on there. There's no funding and expenditures or anything that's going to stop if this doesn't get approved for 3 weeks, let's say. Is it? Could you answer that?
De toute façon, on n'aura probablement pas le temps de voter.
In any event, we probably won't have the time to vote.
And is there anything in this, if we do not adopt or defer or whatever today, this is going to have no financial implications on the work that we're doing on the committee right now? Right.
No.
No. So there are no implications. I just want to make sure I get this clarified. Okay. Thank you.
Vote today then? We would like to put it to a vote. It's not going to change.
Oui, oui, Madame Ashton.
Yes, Ms. Ashton.
Days at our disposal to look at something as important as the main estimates. Sort of this premature deadline when we know that the end of the fiscal year isn't tomorrow, but we still have some days ahead of us seems to be rather mute. And I think this is a very important point or a vote for us. We need time to look at what's before us. We need time to consider the plan, and we disagree with voting today, and we find that the reasoning to do it today rather than waiting for a few days down the line is a moot point, given the window of opportunity we still have ahead of us. So I certainly I'd like to also second the thoughts brought forward by my colleague and Ms. Groh, and respectfully ask the chair that we take time and delay this vote to another day.
Oui, Madame Toupé.
Ms. Toupé.
On something. So if we delay this, can we still continue our study? Is that what you're saying? It doesn't affect our study in any way? Like the witnesses or nothing, you know this for sure? Hurry.
The votes are on the notice paper, so can you vote to continue?
Madame la greffière me confirme que c'est au comité.
Clerk has confirmed that it's up to the committee to determine that, but in any event, with all this discussion that we've just had, we do not have time to vote, sorry. So we'll put that on the agenda for an upcoming meeting. What do people think? Can we have reach some sort of compromise? Yes, Ms. Choupé.
Though. I mean, we knew we were voting on it.
We'll get it over with.
Effectivement. Mais l'heure.
Indeed, but our time has run out for this committee and there's another committee waiting. So I'm sorry, we can't vote now.
We do have time to vote.
Yes, we do.
Can we call the question? Call the question, please.
OK. Désolé, les autres qui attendent pour la salle.
Sorry to those people waiting for the room.
I mean, I'm not sure what's going on here. The date today is March 19th. We're talking about the end of the fiscal year. We are 11 days out of that, and somehow, you know, we have this ultimatum, which is unacceptable. I mean, if we're talking about having to make financial considerations before the end of the fiscal year, I mean, March 19th is not the end of the fiscal year.
C'est pas un point d'ordre, malheureusement, Madame Ashton, mais là.
Fortunately, that's not a point of order, but really, I don't know what members want to do, but we need to start by voting on.
Sorry?
I think the question has been called.
She's saying. Just because she's. Mais il est 1 heure.
The question has been called. You have
Il
to
est 13 heures, Madame Young, le comité était.
1 p.m. and the committee is finished and there's another committee. We can't vote, I'm sorry.
To get the job done. We're not here to accommodate administrative efficiencies. Like, you have spent the last 5 minutes not addressing the call of the question. I think that's important for the record. With respect, Madam Chair. I mean, you have terminated a meeting because of administrative efficiencies.
For the past 5 minutes, I've been trying to not respond to your concerns. I don't accept that accusation. I've been listening to you for 10 minutes. But hold on.
Was called within time. Vous avez une question appelée.
The question was called. We asked for a vote. The clerk has said that the opposition members have left, so we can't vote. Yes, Ms. Choupé.
A motion that we extend the meeting so we can finish the vote? Can we do that?
On ne peut pas, malheureusement, étant donné que les gens...
No, it's not possible because the opposition members have already left. We don't have the quorum, so we cannot.
Donc, je m'excuse, mais je viens d'entretenir avec Madame.
I'm sorry, the clerk has confirmed that we cannot vote. We're going to put this on the next agenda. There are people who are waiting for this room.
La motion de régime ferme pour le quorum.
Dans un instant, Madame Greffière va vérifier.
One moment, the clerk is going to check if that suits you.
Oui, oui, Madame James.
Sorry, I just want to point out as well that you did not officially adjourn the meeting, and so the members that were sitting on the opposite actually got up in the middle of our meeting and left. The actual motion or the question had already been put to this committee, and the fact that some people have left is not the problem on this side. We'd like to proceed with
Vous
that.
avez raison, Madame James, mais on ne peut pas voter.
You're right, Ms. James, but we cannot vote while no member of the opposition is present.
Je suis d'accord. On va vérifier. On s'excuse.
I agree. We'll check. We'll just check on procedure.
Est-ce qu'on a une fiche de séance pour ça? Lu, traduit, oui. Bien. Alors, c'était roi.
Voilà. J'ai mis ça, mais c'est pas très clair.
Ah oui, roi. C'est surtout pour roi, pour quel est son traitement.
Oui, c'est ça.
Là. Tu vois?
Ça sera pas long, c'est une situation, je pense, à laquelle on a jamais.
I'm sorry, it won't take long. We've never had this situation before, so we'll just check.
Please note that the question was called at 12:58 and the opposition members were all here still. Okay?
Indeed.
But the chair refused to call the question.
Je n'ai pas refusé de déclarer de vote.
I didn't refuse. I just noted that we didn't have enough time because there were several votes. I'd like that to be taken into account because it's a subtle difference.
OK. Donc, c'est bon, Madame la greffière vient de vérifier.
Clerk has checked. We can proceed with the vote. So, those in favour of Ms. Chupe's proposal to vote immediately, please raise your hands. Those against, please raise your hands. So, votes 25 under Human Resources and Skills Development carry. Those in favour to adopt vote 25, please raise your hands. Those against, vote 25 under Human Resources and Skills Development, please raise your hands.
Le crédit 30.
Shall vote 30 under Human Resources and Skills Development carry. Those who want to adopt vote 30, please raise their hands. Those that do not want to adopt vote 30, please raise your hands. Third question, shall I report votes 25 and 30 under Human Resources and Skills Development to the House? Yes? Thank you very much. Yes, Ms. Chupe.
Thank you for letting us complete the business at hand that we were supposed to finish. Thank you.
Merci.